On today's episode of You Asked, should you stick with the same electronics brand or is it okay to mix brands? What are the best headphones for quietly listening to TV? Which big TV has the best sound quality? And who needs a line conditioner or surge protector? All those and more coming right up. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and this is You Asked, the show where I answer questions you asked in hopes that I can help you and others who have similar tech questions. If you've got a question for me, please send it to youasked@digitaltrends.com, and we'll see if your question gets picked to be answered on the show. We start with an email that came in from Stuart Skeen, who got himself a new LG SQ95R soundbar, but the 2016 LG TV he has doesn't have eARC. And while he's getting Dolby Atmos by using a Fire TV stick connected directly to his soundbar, he'd like to change up his connection configuration and utilize eARC. So he's looking into getting a new TV, which, if you ask me, is like one heck of a stretch of a justification point when really I think upgrading your TV after 8 years is just fine. Anyway, Stuart writes, I was wondering if there is still any advantage to keeping the same brand. LG has a new QNED line coming out for 2024 along with still available 2022 and 2023 QNEDs. And I know I can't go wrong with any of the LG OLED equipment. The price points for the OLED sets are a bit high, so I was thinking either the Hisense U7K, U8K, or TCL QM8 QLED TVs. Thoughts? Should I stick with the same brand or does it even matter anymore? Another email came in from Dominique Hernando, who wrote, my wife and I are looking into purchasing a new TV and I actually want the LG G3. Unfortunately, my wife wants the S90C, so it begs the question, if we end up going with my choice, will there be a compatibility issue if I get the Samsung soundbar, the Q990C, or am I better off with the Samsung S90C TV to go with it? Thanks for your question, Stuart and Dom. I'm glad you asked because this question around the merits of sticking within the same brand among various components has been going on for decades. Here's my response. Ideally, you shouldn't have to stick within the same brand. Fundamental compatibility is supposed to be ensured thanks to standards like HDMI and HDMI CEC and HDCP. Ideally, you should be able to connect any brand soundbar to any brand's TV and get at least basic compatibility and functionality. And I'd say the majority of the time, that is the case. But at least with HDMI connections, it isn't always the case. Sometimes soundbars and TVs connected via HDMI just, for one reason or another, do not get along. Folks complain to me about a variety of issues, ranging from occasional signal dropouts to full-on failures. And the underlying cause for the trouble varies if it can even be determined. And it's super inconsistent too, which is just like maddening. Like Gerald, for instance, might have trouble getting his Sony soundbar to work with his Hisense TV, but Sally, with the exact same setup, doesn't have that trouble. Look, I don't think anyone should actively avoid mixing brands between TV and soundbar especially, but I do think it's worth keeping in mind that as you do that, it is possible you could run into trouble. And if you do, and you can't manage to solve the issue, you should return one of the products and try again. But if you do stick within the same brand, not only does the likelihood that they'll play nicely together go up a little bit, but you only have one company to bark at if you do have trouble, and that company's tech support team is not going to be able to pass the buck to another brand out of laziness. The only other reason it may be desirable to stick to the same brand is to unlock specialty features that you'll only get by using one brand's wares. For example, if you want to take advantage of Samsung's Q Symphony sound feature, you'll need to use all Samsung gear. Or if you want wireless Dolby Atmos audio signal delivery between a TV and a soundbar, you may need to stick with the same brand because they don't all use the same wireless transmission protocols. All of that to say, Stuart, that you should not have to purchase an LG TV to enjoy Dolby Atmos sound on your LG soundbar. You should be able to make it work with either the Hisense or TCL TV models that you mentioned. But you may want to do a quick search to make sure that there isn't some forum thread out there with like 200 people all saying the same thing about how their SQ95R doesn't ever work with this one TV make and model. Dom, I don't think you should have any problems using the Q990C with an LG G3. I use a Q990C with a Sony A95L and with zero issues. But I do think you might like some of the Q Symphony sound compatibility that would come with pairing that soundbar with the S90C. You know, should your spouse prevail in this decision. Teen Yo writes, love the show. I'm a longtime listener and first-time asker. I share an apartment with a roommate and the walls are thin, so I can't use a soundbar with my LG C1 OLED TV without annoying him with my content. I mostly watch shows or movies on streaming platforms and I play video games. What would you recommend for a wireless headphone that doesn't cost over $500? So T, I think the best advice I can give you here is to consider avoiding Bluetooth headphones. My primary concern is with latency. Now, if you have Bluetooth headphones and you can connect them to your TV, the C1 does support Bluetooth audio out, and it works okay for you, then wow, there are so many great wireless headphones that are well under $500 that you could choose from. I'd actually suggest you check out our best headphones under $100 list at digitaltrends.com. There are some on that list that just sound incredible for their price. With that said though, I'm a big fan of dedicated RF wireless headphones for watching TV. Sony and Sennheiser both make great options ranging from $100 to $400 with a wide range of features. But they all use RF, or radio frequency, for their wireless audio transmission. And they all use a base station transmitter that connects to your TV's optical digital audio jack to get the sound from the TV. That's the way I would go. You'll get great sound, very little latency, and depending on how much you spend, you can also get like noise canceling or dialogue enhancement or dynamic range compression. Jim Begley writes, which of the latest TVs, 75-inch or larger, have the best built-in sound system? Well, Jim, I gotta say the best sounding TV out on the market right now is going to be a Sony OLED with the acoustic surface sound technology. And of those, the A95K and A95L are the best. Of course, a 77-inch A95K or A95L is gonna be pretty pricey. But those TV's screens double as speakers, so you have sound coming directly at you from the screen, and that, paired with the bass reinforcement from the TV's built-in subwoofers, makes for really great TV sound. The Hisense UX is also a surprisingly good sounding TV. I recently heard the Samsung S95D brand new TV, and it sounded really solid, which was a pleasant surprise because I remember the S95C being pretty mid. And yeah, I mean, those are really the standouts. Keep in mind that the overwhelming majority of TVs on the market sound pretty bad. So the bar is really low to begin with. Anything that doesn't sound terrible just gets good marks. So there are other TVs that sound okay, but the best sounding TVs? Yeah, I think that's the list. Jeff Johnson is moving and needs a new soundbar. They're gonna go to an apartment, so they don't need room shaking bass, and they have limited surround speaker placement options. He then writes, I've been leaning toward getting the Sonos Arc refurbished through their website as it's currently $509. But I've also been considering the Klipsch Cinema 1200 as it's on sale for $800, or even the Samsung Q930C for $900. So Jeff, there is no question in my mind that you need to get the Sonos Arc. Do not, under any circumstances, get the Klipsch Cinema 1200. I know that may come as a surprise given I just recommended it in the prior You Asked episode, but that soundbar's subwoofer is a beast and it is virtually untamable. And I'll just say it right now, it is not apartment friendly at all. The Samsung Q930C has a little more subwoofer level control than the Klipsch system, and I suppose you could dial it down enough not to upset your neighbors, but frankly, the Sonos Arc has the best sound without relying on a subwoofer at all, which is the primary reason you should get it. And it also has the ability to be tuned to your room for the best sound quality and surround sound effects at your listening position. I say get the Sonos Arc. At $509, it's a great deal. Plus, you can add onto it later down the road if you like. Okay, let's try and do some rapid fire Q&A and try to get through a few more of these this week. Miller Cook writes, what reasonably priced surround sound setup would you recommend for those of us who rent homes, apartments, and can't run speaker wire through walls or don't have the space for mounting surround speakers? Currently planning on utilizing Dolby Flex Connect with my Sony OLED once released. So Miller, Bose and Sonos are the champs of virtual surround sound, so a soundbar from them without surround speakers is going to get you the best overall effect. But I mean, 2024 has some surprises in store, and well, let's just say Sony might be coming out with something that really interests you this year. Bill Sheehan writes, I've used a line conditioner or isolation transformer on my AV equipment for 25 years now, and I have never lost a piece of equipment to power issues. I was wondering what your experience is with this and any additional advice you might have to protect your TV and sound system investment. Bill, I'll be honest, I haven't used a bunch of line conditioners, even though I certainly would if someone sent me some. I just haven't spent the money on it to get that clean power. I think both clean power and surge protection are hugely important though. I think a lot of people don't realize that there are other devices on a home's electrical system that make a lot of noise, and that noise definitely gets through, especially through your amplifier and passed on to your speakers. So clean power can really give you much better audio. I think the best way to get relatively clean power and stable power to anyone's gear is to run a dedicated circuit for your AV gear. But not everyone can do that. Surge protection is so important though, not an option, and you can't just rely on those cheap power strips that you get at the hardware store. I would say anyone who has relatively expensive or just valuable electronics gear needs at the very least a really strong surge protection system, and check the fine print on it and verify that it offers a warranty or insurance on anything that you have connected to it. I would also say if you live in an area that is prone to power surges, power spikes, sudden brownouts, or just inclement weather in general that can cause those things, might not be such a bad idea to get an insurance policy for your gear. Vikram asks, what generally looks better, 4K SDR or 1080p with HDR? I do know that HDR makes a difference looking at the comparison videos, but will it be that noticeable when you don't have another display playing SDR? I assume he means like in a side-by-side. That's really hard to answer because there are a lot of factors at play. But broadly speaking, I'll take HDR over resolution in almost all cases. Unfortunately, when it comes to streaming TV, 1080p often doesn't just mean fewer pixels, it also means lower bit depth, lower color information. Also, we're presuming the 4K upscaling on a 4K TV is good enough to make that 1080p signal look high quality. But yeah, in my experience, HDR generally has a much higher impact than higher resolution, at least at 85 inches and lower. Also from Vikram, another question, would you recommend getting a 4K Blu-ray player and collecting discs over spending money on Netflix, Prime Video, and other streaming services? I would actually make no such recommendation unless I knew a whole lot more about you and your priorities and your preferences and your habits. I would say that if all you watch is movies and all you care about is the best video and the best sound quality, then 4K Blu-rays are awesome and unmatched. But it is impossible to argue with the fact that streaming services offer such a huge variety of content and a massive amount of titles. There's just no way 2 or 3 $20 Blu-ray discs a month is gonna beat a whole month of streaming whatever I want in 4K and often HDR, even if it is a bit compressed. No shot. Alan J wrote in telling me he has a 9 by 14 foot room, sits about 6 feet from the TV, and has a Vizio Elevate soundbar system with the subwoofer placed on the left side of a 5-seater couch. And he says, for some reason, the corner seats have amazing bass, but that bass gets lower approaching the middle seat to a point where almost no bass reaches. Do you have any idea why that is? I can't afford a sound professional to come see why, and I'm kind of stuck with this position. So Alan, what you're experiencing is a real bugger that drives many of us crazy, and it's part of the fundamental laws of acoustics. Do you know how noise canceling headphones work? They work by creating sound waves that are exactly 180 degrees out of phase with the sound they detect through their microphones. When we sum up one sound wave with one that is 180 degrees out of phase with it, what we get is a null. That means they are canceling each other out. The sound waves are definitely being made. That energy is happening, and in headphones you can kind of feel the pressure from it, but we can't hear the tones. I can demonstrate that by taking the same music signal, piping it through a couple of speakers, and placing the speakers so they're facing each other. And as the drivers in these speakers move back and forth at each other, 180 degrees out of phase with each other, they cancel each other out. So why the acoustics lesson? Well, what happens in your room is that the bass waves your subwoofer is putting out come out of the subwoofer, then go about bouncing around the room. Unfortunately, the bass waves coming directly from the subwoofer will, at some places in the room, be 180 degrees out of phase with the bass waves bouncing off of your walls, ceiling, and floor, and they cancel each other out, which makes it seem like you aren't hearing the bass. The best way to deal with this is by moving your subwoofer. Now, I understand if you can't move it to another area of the room, especially since the surround speakers run off of that subwoofer. So try rotating it 90 degrees and see what happens. Or set it on its side and see what happens then. You might want to put a towel under it since it won't have any feet. And if that makes a difference, but maybe not enough of a difference, try repositioning it a little bit more. See what happens. And hey, write in again and let us know what happened. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. What did you think of the questions that I picked this week? Let me know down in the comments. I want to make sure I'm picking good stuff. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.